Good evening. My name's Amy Cleesis. I'm from the League of Women Voters. I'm a volunteer, and I'm here tonight with Tracey Reed, who's running for District 5 School Board. And thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. We're going to have a little conversation. So let's just get started.
Okay.
Would you like to tell voters why you're running for school board, including background and experience and anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. I am a former teacher. I am a parent of 2 Pittsburgh Public School students, well, 1 graduate and 1 student. I have a PhD in education policy. I have spent my entire professional career focused on improving the lives of children, specifically mostly with regard to equitable and high quality schooling for children. And so I have been really disappointed with the direction of Pittsburgh Public Schools, and I know that we could do better by our children. And so I decided that I would run for school board and try to affect some change in our district.
Awesome. Anything else? Is that good? Okay.
So.
All right. How about, everyone likes to talk about money. How would you deal with the budget deficit that we've been reading about?
Sure. So I think that one of the things we have to figure out with regard to our budget deficit is how we got here. Like, how did we go from 5 years ago having a more than $100 million budget surplus to entering this this current year with about a $30 million budget deficit. So I believe that part of the issue is not having a clear spending plan, not being sort of thoughtful about how we're expending resources. We could do a lot better. For example, we've spent tens of millions of dollars on technology, and yet when the pandemic happened, students still didn't have what they needed to engage in remote instruction. And that's and I recognize that there were broadband issues as well, but the kids didn't even have the devices, and we had spent lots and lots of money on technology. So when we think about things like that, we have to begin to question whether or not we've been spending wisely. And I believe that we have to do a deeper dive into how the budgeting process goes. It feels like we just sort of go with the sort of budget areas, and we're not really thoughtful about, you know, there definitely are times we need to scale back. There are times we need to move forward in particular areas. And so I just think we need more transparency around the budget, and we have to be more planful and mindful about how we're doing budgeting.
Excellent. Great. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. How would you support English language learners?
So yeah, we have a growing English language learner population in Pittsburgh Public. And I think that one of the things that I know is that if we just do really high quality school, it will be better for our English language learners, right? But in addition, there are special needs of English language learners that we have to attend to. We have to make sure that we are, that the information that families are receiving is in a form that they can actually access. And we also have to, and I think this is probably true for most of our families, but we have to begin to over communicate with families, especially our English language learners. They're, entering into not only a system that does not have that we don't share the same language, but also into a schooling system that may be very different from anything that they're accustomed to. So we have to over communicate with families. And then we have to be really mindful about how we support our English language learners with regard to with regard to things that we hold where we think are pretty simple, like homework. How do we make sure that our English language learners are getting the extra support that they need, and their families are getting the extra support that they need to even assist with homework and things like that. So I think that we, one, have to focus on really great schools, having really great schools, and then to look specifically at those needs that arise because of language differences, respecting people's cultures, and making sure that they have all of the information that they need in a way that's accessible to them.
Communication is so important. And I noticed you said over communicate. What kind of things would you do? That's a great word.
Yeah, so I think, I look at this with English language learner families. I believe that there is a need not only to do the sort of the basic, newsletter, for example, that you get every week from your child's school. We have to, for families who don't have access to the language that we are communicating in, we have to make sure that they have information. We have to give them, I think a lot of our newsletters are way too long. We have to give them information in sizable chunks. We have to make sure that we don't tell families just one time that a particular event or a particular kind of some meeting or event is happening. We have to let them know many times. And then we have to make sure that we are also accessing trusted partners for those families who can translate, not just language wise, but translate culturally, to help families to become sort of acclimated to the way we do school. So we have to do more. And I think that that's also the case for our families with regard to COVID. We really have to begin to over communicate with families so that they understand that the physical, social, educational needs of their children are going to be met in school when we return or as we do remote schooling.
Great. Not exactly the same, but let's move on to this big topic. How can a board member support increasing literacy?
So one of the things that I learned, I was a high school English teacher. And one of the things that I learned was that when the entire community understands sort of the science of reading, and not just not the same way like a reading specialist understands the science of reading, but in a way that is reasonable for the subject matter. When I taught English, it was really necessary that I understood how reading happens so that I could help those young people, even though I taught high school, how I could help them improve their reading skills. So as a board member, one of the things that I believe is so necessary is for the entire education community to understand the science of reading and respect it with respect to the subject matter that they teach or the roles that they're in, but they understand the science of reading, and that we all are sort of singularly focused on helping students at all levels, whether they have reading proficiency or not, to experience literacy-rich environments, to improve their reading skills. So, and it has to be a sort of a collective district-wide effort. It can't just be left to elementary school reading teachers or reading specialists. It has to be something that is district-wide and that it is common education, like understanding with regard to the science of reading. There are hardly any skills that a person needs more than they need the ability to be able to read well. And grasping reading at the third grade level especially has so much impact on a child's trajectory, educationally, socially, economically. And so we have to really double down on understanding how reading happens, like what happens in the brain when we learn to read, and how at each stage in the game we can be supporting that, how every educator can be supporting that.
Great. You talked about being a high school teacher. We'll go to the other end of the spectrum. How about sharing some ideas about how you would expand early childhood education?
Yeah, that's early childhood education is probably one of the most important interventions to help improve outcomes for kids. It is so incredibly important. We know that it's effective. It is hard to wrap my mind around why we don't have universal early childhood education in our city. So one of the ways that I would connect with the early learning community is I am a friend, a huge supporter of Trying Together. They have their finger on the pulse, not just of early learning settings with regard to like sort of formal centers of early learning, but also home-based care. And so I would really as a board member, advocate for a close relationship between providers and our early and our school sets, our schools, K-12 schools, so that what is happening in pre-K, what is happening in those early learning settings, whether they are home-based or center-based, what is happening in them is going to prepare and to sort of accelerate students' learning once they reach their more formal school. And the other thing that I think we should really sort of clue in on is that in early learning, there is such a focus on human development and on learner development that sort of gets lost as kids get older. And I really wish that we would take our cues from our early learning providers and really continue to focus on what is good human development as kids go through our systems. I think school would look a little different if we actually focused on what's developmentally appropriate for kids at certain ages.
Great. Okay, kind of just back to a more general question. What are your top priorities to improve the district?
Yeah, so I was just talking to my kids about that. One is a PPS graduate, one is a 10th grader in PPS. And one of the things that they both said that really struck me, and it's actually how I answered the question at A+, is one, listen to students. So one of the ways that I would go about trying to improve the district is finding ways to listen to students. Now, what usually happens is we find, there are sort of formal ways that students can offer their opinions, and that's all well and good. That's great. But who we hear from are usually those students for whom school is working pretty well. They're doing a good job. They're usually performing academically. They are already school leaders. And the kids we never hear from, I shouldn't say never, the kids we don't hear as much from are kids for whom school is not working. It's not a good place for them. They are not thriving. They are not getting what they need. And those are the kids that are going to help us improve the system. The system is already working for a certain group of children, for a certain group of students. And so one of my priorities is really to listen to students and not just the students who are doing well. So that's one priority. I also believe that we have to really figure out how to align our budget with the mission of the district. We have one of the sort of stated mission of the district is sort of to prepare students for life after high school, rather that, that's work or post-secondary schooling and I'm not sure that our budget priorities align with that mission. And so, and that preparation doesn't just start in high school, right? That starts all the way in pre-K. If we're really going to prepare students, especially students who come to school with challenges, if we're really going to prepare them for post-secondary school, then or post-secondary life after school, then we have to begin at the very earliest ages. So that is another priority for me, is really thinking about that mission and what that means for how students are, experiencing school, and what that means for how we're budgeting our finances.
Terrific. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we're almost ready to wrap up. Any last things we didn't cover that you think are really important you'd like to add before we end?
Well, one of the things that I find really that we need, I think the board could take real leadership on, is the idea that we give lots of lip service to all children can learn, right? We say that all the time, all children can learn. And somehow when we see the outcomes that we're getting for students and we accept them as sort of, that's just what's going to happen because these students are Black, or these students are poor, or these students are English language learners, or whatever reason that we give for students not having great outcomes, it doesn't feel like we believe all kids can learn. And so I believe that, on some level, we have sort of a belief gap in the district about whether or not we can create the kinds of schools that need to be created so that students can thrive. We don't seem as committed to that idea because we just accept that some students are going to fail. And I wholeheartedly believe that all students can be successful. And I believe that it is really incumbent upon our district to create the kinds of schools that all students can be successful in. And it is not a, oftentimes we blame kids, or we blame their families or their communities for why they're not successful. Kids are who they're going to be. Families are just trying to survive. Like the circumstances they're in are just their circumstances. What we need to be doing is creating the kinds of schools that can help them to be academically successful, because that's the only job we have. That's it.
Right. Wonderful. Well, we've been talking to Tracey Reed, District 5 school board candidate. And I want to shout out to the sign right there, voteschoolboardfirst.org. If you go on there, there's more information. And I guess the last thing we have to say is vote, right? May 18th, everybody vote.
Please vote.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.